We have before us a train of development of experiences starting from the experience of matter to different grades of the supraphysical, immaterial, of life and mind, and of cosmic consciousness. And then we arrived at an experience which Aurobindo has described in terms of the Upanishad, the experience of what is called the Advaitic experience, as it has been expounded in the Advaitic philosophy of Shankara. That Advaitic experience lays stress on the supervening experience of silence. It's an experience of what is called the inactive Brahman. It is also called in the Gita the experience of Kutastha, Aksharaha Purushaha, of the immobile Purusha. Now this experience, right from the time of the Upanishad, has played a major role in the determination of the attitude in India towards life. There has been a constant assertion of a movement towards inactivity. If reality is inactive, completely silent, one without the second, then the highest realization that we can attain is also that of the inactive Brahman. And that is the reason why we have in India a tremendous, almost overwhelming message turned towards inactivity. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, the conflict that has been portrayed in regard to Arjuna is that of a conflict between activity and inactivity. The terms are differently used at different stages in India, but in the Bhagavad Gita, the term that is used is the inactivity as proposed in the Sankhya, as opposed to activity, which in the Gita is proposed to be the aim of yoga. In the Sankhyan philosophy, ultimate reality is that of Purusha, an individual self which is luminous and inactive. In Jainism also, the ultimate reality to be realized is the jiva, which is entirely inactive, free from all action or karma. Again, in Buddhism too, the aim is to withdraw from all activity and to enter into the state of inactivity although the term used in Buddhism is that of non-being. In the Advaitic philosophy, that inactivity is the character of the being. In Buddhism, there is an assertion of non-being. But there also the ultimate aim is to withdraw from all activity. It is true that this is not the only note in Indian thought. There have been many other philosophies and many systems of yoga in which inactivity is not regarded to be the supreme. Even in the Upanishads, para is of course the inactive Brahman, but there is also the concept of paratpara. There's something that is beyond inactivity. In the Bhagavad Gita also, the supreme is not Kutastha, is not the inactive Brahman, but Purushottama, the one who is beyond both activity and inactivity. But still, in modern India even, the gospel of inactivity has been holding a very high position among all the voices that we hear, particularly since the idea of Brahman has been revived in recent times, and the study of Vedanta Sutra and the interpretation given of this Vedanta Sutra by Shankaracharya has become very widespread. And as a result, the gospel of inactivity has been greatly emphasized. It is true, however, that the modern interpreters of the Advaitic Vedanta of Shankaracharya, because of the pressure on action of the modern days, there is a new interpretation. But this new interpretation tries to give concession to dynamism of life. But that dynamism is ultimately to be transcended. In Swami Vivekananda, this trend of Advaitic Vedanta is very strong. And in his gospel, there is a combination of this Advaitic experience with another ideal which is called Daridra Narayan Seva, the service of the poorest of the poor. This idea also has been very prominent in the teaching of Vivekananda. And this seva is a dynamic action. Therefore, somehow, some dynamic action is given place. Despite all this, the one general trend, as Aurobindo points out, is in the last two lines that we read, we have the starting point for a second negation, parallel at the other pole to the materialist, but more complete, more final, more perilous in its effects on the individuals or collectivities, that hear its potent call to the wilderness, the refusal of the ascetic. It is this revolt of spirits against matter that for 2000 years, since Buddhism disturbed the balance of the old Aryan world, has dominated increasingly the Indian mind. Not that the sense of the cosmic illusion is the whole of Indian thought. There are other philosophical statements other religious aspirations. Nor has some attempt at an adjustment between the two terms been wanting even from the most extreme philosophies. But all have lived in the shadow of the great refusal, and the final end of life for all is the garb of the ascetic. The general conception of existence has been permeated with the Buddhistic theory of the chain of karma and with the consequent antinomy of bondage and liberation. Bondage by birth, liberation by cessation from birth. Therefore, all voices are joined in one great consensus that not in this world of the dualities can there be our kingdom of heaven, but beyond, whether in the joys of the eternal Vrindavana or the high beatitude of Brahmaloka, beyond all manifestations, in some ineffable nirvana, or where all separate experience is lost in the featureless unity of the indefinable existence. And through many centuries, a great army of shining witnesses, saints and teachers, names sacred to Indian memory and dominant in Indian imagination, have borne always the same witness and swelled always the same lofty and distant appeal. Renunciation, the sole path of knowledge; acceptation of physical life, the act of the ignorant; cessation from birth, the right use of human birth; the call of the spirit, the recoil from matter. This has been the dominant note of Indian thought even today. One of the important questions that Aurobindo asks is that there is a claim that this experience of Kutastha, of the inactive Brahman, is the highest fact of existence. This is the claim. There is nothing beyond. And the claim is that one should always aim at the highest. And if the highest is the inactive Brahman, and if it is really true and nothing else, then there should be no question at all. If that is the highest. There is a claim it is the highest. The question is whether it is really the highest. Sri Aurobindo himself, in his own development of yoga, had this experience of the inactive Brahman almost at the very start of his own yoga. What is regarded as the highest and ultimate and the final one turned out in the case of Sri Aurobindo one of the first realizations, and that too within 3 days of meditation. And the facthood of this experience is therefore undeniable. That there is the inactive Brahman, that there is an eternal inactivity and silence, and that silence which can never be disturbed, whatever may be the rush of action. This truth is undeniable. It is verifiable, repeatable. Hundreds and thousands have done it and reaffirmed it. I would like to read out to you Sri Aurobindo's own description of this experience of the inactive Brahman. Sri Aurobindo says, now to reach Nirvana was the first radical result of my own yoga. It threw me suddenly into a condition above and without thought, unstained by any mental or vital movement. There was no ego, no real world. Only when one looked through the immobile senses, something perceived or bore upon its sheer silence a world of empty forms, materialized shadows without true substance. There was no one or many even, only just absolutely that, featureless, relationless, sheer, indescribable, unthinkable, absolute, yet supremely real and solely real. This was no mental realization, nor something glimpsed somewhere above. No abstraction. It was positive, the only positive reality. Although not a special physical world, pervading, occupying, or rather flooding and drowning the semblance of a physical world, leaving no room or space for any reality but itself, allowing nothing else to seem at all actual, positive, or substantial. I cannot say there was anything exhilarating or rapturous in the experience as it then came to me. The ineffable Ananda I had years afterwards. But what it brought was an inexpressible peace, a stupendous silence, an infinity of release and freedom. I lived in that nirvana day and night before it began to admit other things into itself or modify itself at all, and the inner heart of experience a constant memory of it, and its power to return remained until in the end it began to disappear into a greater superconsciousness from above. This is the experience that Aurobindo describes regarding. There are many other experiences of the same different descriptions given by him of the same experience. But this is the basic experience and basic description of this realization. So that such an experience exists, such a reality exists, is undeniable. In Aurobindo's philosophy, the assertion of the inactive Brahman is a necessary part of the totality of all the affirmations that we find in Aurobindo. The only question was whether this inactive Brahman is the only fact